Rajiv did his PhD at UIUC and his bachelor's degree at the University of Wisconsin. He's since moved back to Wisconsin.
Be close to my folks, yeah.
So anyway, great to have you, Rajiv.
Thank you. It's good to see you again. I remember being in this room, except I was over there. No, it's great to be back. I think I just put this up to remind myself this is where I'm supposed to be. So I think Craig reached out to me and he said, "Hey, we'd love to have you come back and talk about, encouraging people to go and take a look at, productizing or going to the startup world or doing tech transfer into the marketplace." And so in order to encourage everyone, I titled the talk "Staring into the Abyss and Eating Glass." And I don't know if you guys does anyone know what the source of that quote is from? Probably. If you don't know in the startup world, it's Elon didn't say it, but Elon, that's how I discovered it. It's sort of a well-known phrase. He was talking to Salman Khan, who's also a founder of Khan Academy. And I'd play, but like, well, why not just play it so you can see sort of what it's like. Why you should.
I would say it's really not that fun. I mean, there are periods of fun, and there are periods of where it's just awful. And particularly if you're the CEO of the company, you actually have a distillation of all the worst problems in the company. There's no point in spending your time on things that are going right. So you only spend your time on things that are going wrong. And there are things that are going wrong that other people can't take care of. So you have like the worst. You have a filter for the crappiest problem in the company, the most pernicious and painful problem. So I wouldn't say I think you have to feel quite compelled to do it, and have a fairly high pain threshold. And there's a friend of mine who says like starting a company is like staring into the abyss and eating glass. And there's some truth to that. The staring into the abyss part is that you're going to be constantly facing the extermination of the company, because most startups fail. It's like 90%, probably 99% of startups fail. So that's the staring into the abyss part. You're constantly saying, okay, if I don't get this right, the company will die. It should be quite stressful. And then the eating glass part is you've got to do the problems. You got to work on the problems that the company needs you to work on, not the problems you want to work on. And so that's you end up working on problems that you'd really wish you weren't working on. And so that's the eating glass part. And that goes on for a long time.
So how do you? This is very specifically for men over 30 years old.
As Craig, go do a startup. So there's my no. So I think so the interesting part is if you notice in that talk when Elon says that, like Salman Khan's like yes, he's nodding, and I think the reason for that is like you don't have to be Elon to know that that's true. Like I have a lot of friends who are founders of companies, and all of them will basically tell you the same two truisms. But the question is like why does anyone do it? And I think that I would say like yes, all the things that he says are true. But it was also, I would say, like the greatest adventure of my life, and I wouldn't trade that journey for almost anything. And to some degree, I think everybody has to be what they are. But I think I was talking to a student earlier. I was saying like, why do it? And like, there's like people who live on the land, and then people, if you want a little bit of adventure, you might go like on a riverboat cruise, and then there's like sailing the ocean, right? That ocean out there on boats. And there are people who are like, no, I want the adventure and glory. I don't care if there's like pirates and hurricanes and giant alien squid. Like there is adventure and glory in the vast and endless sea. And if you're a sailor, you can't help but do it, and it has its own rewards. And to some degree, it forces you to become like a really amazing version of yourself by necessity. And so I think like there's a lot to it, but it is important to be compelled. And I think it's interesting. Like I had an office that stared at the vast and endless sea here for many years. But I think like the lesson for all the things is at the end of the day, it's always a people journey. So I think I'd say like I was here for a long time, and I owe a lot of people. These photographs actually are from I think if you might know him, Pedro Zeckley, who was here. He was actually I used to take pictures of my office out the window, and then Pedro used to get into like, HDR photography, and he would be like always taking these photos and putting them up on Flickr. And I'm like, I'm not taking any more photos of the marina. Pedro, I'm just gonna let people like, where do you work? It's like, let me show you Pedro's photos. And so they were fantastic. But like, it was nice because like there was always like, here I was just sort of staring at the vast Endel Sea, and then eventually I went there. But I think it was like there are definitely many people here who helped make that happen. So first of all, I was a electrical engineering student at Urbana. I studied game theory, as a matter of fact. Not in the basketball game sense, but in the game sense. And like, I really want to get into AI. And Io Millen-Tambay, who was a former ISR and a CS faculty, he brought me in as a postdoc, and sort of brought me into the world of AI. Gerard Medioni made me faculty. And he was in CV at the time. I didn't know that I would end up. I was really envious, and I eventually ended up getting into CV. I came here. Pedro was responsible for bringing me my postdoc to become a full-time member at ISI and USC, and I worked with him for many years, learned a lot about data visualization, user interfaces, lots of how to actually build software that I took with me. And so I owe him a lot. And honestly, I owe Herb Shore a lot. Herb used to interview all the people who came in here. And I remember going to a little cafe, a Chinese cafe on the corner. I don't know if it was here, it's still here with Herb. But so he like looked me up and down to see if I could come here. But Herb was also really important because like he did small things to support ISI. So the most important thing that probably happened to me in my entire career is I met Yuhan Chang, who was another faculty here in a different division. And there was a tiny interdivisional ISI award. And Yuhan and I met at the Singapore Express a little bit. I think that's gone too. But that little award, like Yuhan, I remember I was looking over our emails, and Yuhan and I decided to apply for that together. And Herb, that award that Herb had, and Herb, we were the winners that year. And that really started the two of us working together. And we started a research group called the Computational Behavior Group, CBG, where we just studied using data. We didn't want to study human behavior. And so the website's down, but luckily the internet remembers everything. So I went back to the Wayback Machine, and like, here's a snapshot of the website. There's ISI, there's USC, a whole bunch of our students from, I guess this was probably 14 or so, a couple of people, Adam and Sheldon, who were young kids there. And this video doesn't play, but luckily that the wonderful ISI has this. So this is what our research was. This is the kind of stuff that we did. So here we go.
I'm Yuhan Chang. I'm a research faculty in the Department of Computer Science and a project leader at ISI here at the University of Southern California.
And I'm Rajiv Maheswaran. I'm also a project leader at ISI and a research faculty in computer science.
Over the past decade, there's been a proliferation of spatial movement data. People tweeting or checking in particular locations, people moving around on surveillance cameras, being tracked as they move through a retail store like Walmart.
Optical tracking, where you put cameras in stadiums, for example, sports stadiums, you can track how all the players in the ball moves.
Our research is about finding patterns in this data and making sense of it. Being able to communicate that data in terms of interactive visualizations and being able to help people who are interested in finding these patterns and making use of this data.
We use machine learning, pattern recognition. We use a field called multi-agent systems, which is how various intelligent entities interact with each other. We fuse a lot of different fields together to develop our techniques. We've looked at people playing mobile games and looked at their patterns to try and find ways to get them to be more active and be more healthy. We've also looked at the USC Campus Cruiser, which is a local taxi service. We've tracked the GPS coordinates for about a year, and we found out we can actually identify the drivers just by how they drive.
When people tweet, sometimes it comes with a latitude, longitude. Looking at the vast store of tweets available now, we can actually find sort of the patterns of life of a city as people move around day to day, what the city of Los Angeles looks like on a daily basis. So then when you have anomalous events or your special events, you can very quickly and automatically find events like the Rose Bowl Parade, and you're able to actually track the Rose Bowl Parade even as it moves down Colorado Boulevard.
We've gone from not being able to have data to having lots of data, but now there remains a gap of going from data to insight that actually helps you make better decisions, and we're trying to bridge that gap.
So thank you, ISI, for giving that video.
Building your online business?
Whoops. I'm using all publicly available video, so we are going to pay the YouTube tax. as you can tell, like we were really just interested in modeling human behavior. And one of the things that we developed here was like, we just really got into like, what we call the science of moving dots, of like finding like movement data and trying to extract patterns from it. And a lot of the challenge, those are a lot of different projects that we had. And a lot of the projects were actually just finding interesting ways to even like get a decent set of data. Like we were like looking like public location-based Twitter, the campus cruiser, making video games just to even get a decent set of positional data on which we could do research. But we were pretty creative, and like even a lot of the projects were super fun. I mean, I think Yuhan was a big StarCraft fans. We had like a StarCraft AI bot. We were looking at the movement of all those things, and so we were trying to be very scrappy to like actually even get data. When we sort of struck gold in a way where sports was a particular technology started getting into sports where they were like tracking players at super high fidelity in the NBA, and then the problem shifted from can you actually collect a lot of this data to I've got these piles and piles of data, and no one knew what to do with it. And then luckily we had spent like a good chunk of years trying to figure out what to do with the data. And so when we hit the NBA, there were like piles of data, and the whole fields were just like, I don't know that this has anything useful in these piles and piles of coordinate data. And for fun, again, we went to there's a MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference. We were able to get a little bit of this data, and we were able to make an insight that was sort of made a big splash. And here's sort of in fact, somebody in LA came to us and said, we'd like to make a video of your work. And so this is like a video of the thing that led to that research paper. Here we go.
What's happened is in the last decade or so, we've just been able to collect lots and lots of data in places we've never been able to collect before. Now the question is, what do we do with all this data? Basketball is kind of a dance. There's always sort of moves and counter moves, pick and rolls and screens. The statistics we have right now are the best we can do as a function of the box score. This guy took a shot, that guy got a rebound. Now with this new optical tracking data, you get to see the game in a way that you can never see it before. The question is, how do you translate that data into something that can help them win? Before, taking a long two-point shot was a bad idea because it had a low probability of going in. What we figured out was, not only is it bad for that reason, it's bad because that's the worst type of shot to try and get back. These are new insights that we're able to get from the data that we didn't have before. Slight shifts in strategy, slight changes in which players you play, which plays you run, are going to affect who wins and loses. These are all the things that are not that different in sports and in business. If you know more, if you can see more, you can make better decisions. And data is a way of making what was invisible visible. It's an art in and of itself.
There's that. And so I don't know if you guys caught it, but in there, basically, we were able to like get this property of how likely you could get a ball if you missed. That I won't go into the great detail, but there was basically an insight and the difference between taking a 2 and a 3-pointer, which was a big thing going on in the NBA of how often you should take one versus the other. And the interesting thing about it is not that it was like super deep, but it was important, and no one in the NBA, and we gave this presentation in front of lots of coaches and GMs and people who were decades and decades in the field. Not only did no one know it, but no one could explain it. And so it was like the first moment, it's like, oh, there's something in here that like us as a field who's been studying this for our livelihoods for basically our whole lives, many decades, just both had no clue, and then also could not like in a snap explain away. And so that sort of made a bunch of noise. And so it made a bunch of noise in the sports world. And so and then luckily, so again, thankfully USC, there was a bunch of publicity, and the USC Stevens Institute actually actively reached out. A big thank you to Mark Stevens, who both funded the institute. They put us through a boot camp, Yuhan and I, and a bunch of our students through a boot camp and to do a startup. And at the end, we pitched it in front of a bunch of investors. And, we were just like treating it like another grant. Like, maybe we'll get a small grant, do this for like a year or two, get some students and see where it goes. And I mean, it turned out like there was quite a bit of appetite to both see it become alive. And like shortly after that, with the encouragement, and the help and Mark Stevens ended up being independently our seed investor as well. There were others, but so both the Stevens Institute and Mark Stevens himself had a lot to do with both the company starting and surviving. So we definitely owe him like a ton, and he helped us through a lot of tough times. And this is sort of a little bit of what happened there.
Or video game units that were moving around. And we thought it was fascinating. There were all these numbers coming out for the coordinates of all these things, all these moving dots, and said, wouldn't it be fun to build the mathematics and the science of moving dots? And if you're working in the science of moving dots, there's an interesting place where lots of people are moving around. And that happens to be sports. So Johan and I got a hold of some sports data, and we wrote a paper for fun at a conference primarily devoted to the intersection of math and sports. And unfortunately for us, or fortunately for us, we won an award, and then we won another award. And the University of Southern California came to us and said, Johan, Rajiv, you guys should start a company. And we said, I don't know if you think highly of us, or if you're just trying to get us to leave, but it sounds like fun. So we're going to do it.
This is another student right here, Tal Levy. He was in our research group. That's my Johan and myself. I'm gonna move forward. So I think let me move forward a little bit here. Hold on. Here we go.
While you may not know it, was at the intersection of math and sports. Way to make Justin fall over there, Jeff. So what do two professors and a college dropout do when they start a company? The most responsible thing we can do is convince 4 of our students to drop out of school and join our company. Now, they were 19, 19, 20, and 21 at the time, which means they were adults. They're all still there.
So that was actually several years ago, and they're all still there. So that's Tal, Sheldon, Adam, and Cameron. Tal, Sheldon, and Adam were in our research group. Cameron joined as a sophomore. He was our first intern. He joined right away that summer. He was a sophomore in computer science. There were a couple other people in our research group who also came along. She joined our group as an 18-year-old freshman. We couldn't get her to drop out of school, so she did her degree and then joined us. And there was another Nabir who was a master's student here, and I may be forgetting. And then we also at the start recruited quite heavily out of USC as well. So a lot of students, a lot of USC people sort of went with us, and so this is all sort of there was clearly like as you can see like a large sort of train of connections from just coming here to starting the company. And what is the company? So this is what Second Spectrum was, if you don't know.
Second Spectrum lies at the intersection of sports and data and technology. And right now, there's basically a one-size-fits-all solution. But as we know, we don't all like the same thing.
It's becoming an on-demand world. And that's a fundamental, almost inalienable right today that was non-existent 20 years ago, let alone 50 years ago.
With the information age, big data has hit sports. The problem is the data itself is not valuable to people. It's the ability to use data to turn the content into things people care about. What we're bringing at Second Spectrum is the ability to transform data into capabilities that can really change people's experiences.
The good news is you can get very specific and you can get target exactly what you want, when you want it, and where you want it.
That bridge is essentially a computer that understands the game, because a computer that understands the game and understands you can give you what you want.
That to me is ultimate choice. It's going to be a big part of the sporting experience.
We combine machine learning, computer vision, design, user experience to create a platform that is able to understand both sports and people and transform content into ways that people actually want to experience them.
That's where I see companies like Second Spectrum playing a role. They're going to continue to be that next growth area in making the experience richer and much more personal tomorrow than it is today.
And so that was a high level sort of idea, but the core is that really a lot of data enables a machine to understand
How to get the
something.
most of
Whoops,
Grammarly free.
tax
It's
again.
Kayla on behalf.
Get rid of that. Okay. I'll be on my toes here. Yeah, that's not bad. It's not bad. The data basically allows a machine to understand something. Once a machine understands something, it can basically allow you to personalize human engagement and interaction with that thing. So the simple example is once a machine understands maps, it can give you directions, personalized directions automatically. Once it understands music, it can give you personalized playlists. Same thing, and we're seeing that happening more and more in the world. So this was we were one of the early ones to sort of bring that message to sports. And as you can see now, especially with everything going on in AI, that seems less and less of a novelty of an idea. But like at the time, the idea that machines could sort of understand things even at or beyond a human level and do things that even sort of the most elite experts couldn't do was not as well received. And also, so in particular, when you go into a world of sports and you've got people who basically lived in the trenches, for decades trying to understand it, and the idea to convince coaches that a machine could help them and give them insights about the game that they've spent their life. It's like there's no way a machine can understand it. That was actually the first bar. So one of the first products we did was we started working with NBA teams, and at this point, every single NBA team is a client and has been for many years. And they did not care about data. You could show them all the coordinate data in the world, and they're just like, I don't care about this. But what they did care about was like understanding core concepts of the game. And one of the first things that we did was like that there was a big deal. Still to this day, is a big deal is that we could extract the language of sports, and both extract the language of sports that only the experts could know, and also like we could put numbers to things that they knew only qualitatively. And those two things were a big deal for coaches. And this is sort of a short summary of like the kind of stuff that we actually did specifically in the NBA.
What are those things? What are the key features that let a computer navigate the world of moving dots? So figuring out all these relationships, both relative and absolute, of location, distance, timing, velocities, that's really the key to the science of moving dots, or as we like to call it, spatiotemporal pattern recognition in academic vernacular. Because the first thing is you have to make it sound hard, and because it is. The key thing is for NBA coaches, it's not that they want to know whether a pick and roll happened or not. It's that they want to know how it happened and why is it so important to them. So here's a little insight. It turns out in modern basketball, this pick and roll is perhaps the most important play. And knowing how to run it and knowing how to defend it is basically a key to winning and losing most games. So it turns out this dance has a great many variations, and identifying the variations are really the things that matters. And that's why we need this to be really, really good. So here's an example. There are two offensive players, two defensive players getting ready to do the pick and roll dance. So the guy with the ball can either take or he can reject. His teammate can either roll or pop. The guy guarding the ball can either go over or under. His teammate can either show or play up to touch or play soft. And together they can either switch or blitz. And I didn't know most of these things when I started. And it would be lovely if everybody moved according to those arrows. It would make our lives a lot easier. But it turns out movement is very, very messy. People wiggle a lot. And getting these variations identified with very, very high accuracy, both in precision and recall, is tough because that's what it takes to get a professional coach to believe in you. And despite all the difficulties with the right spatiotemporal features, we have been able to do that. Coaches trust our ability of our machine to identify these variations. We're at the point where almost every single contender for an NBA championship this year is using our software, which is built on a machine that understands the moving dots of basketball. So not only that, we have given advice that has changed strategies that has helped teams win very important games. And it's very exciting because you've got coaches who've been in the league for 30 years that are willing to take advice from a machine. And it's very exciting. It's much more than the pick and roll. Our computer just started with simple things and learned more and more complex things. And now it knows so many things. Frankly, I don't understand much of what it does. And while it's not that special to be smarter than me, we were wondering, can a machine know more than a coach? Can it know more than a person could know? And it turns out the answer is yes. So coaches want players to take good shots. So if I'm standing near the basket and there's nobody near me, it's a good shot. If I'm standing far away and I'm surrounded by defenders, that's generally a bad shot. But we never knew how good was or how bad was quantitatively until now.
So what we can do, again, use spatiotemporal features. We looked at every shot. We can say, where is the shot? What's the angle to the basket? Where are the defenders standing? What are their distances? What are their angles? For multiple defenders, we can look at how the player is moving and predict the shot type. We can look at all their velocities, and we can build a model that predicts what is the likelihood that this shot would go in under these circumstances. And so why is this important? We could take something that was shooting, which was one thing before, and turn it into two things: the quality of the shot and the quality of the shooter. So here's a bubble chart, because what's TED without a bubble chart?
If you want the bubble chart, you can go see it on your shelf. So the key thing there was that this pick and roll, just the fact that a machine could basically, at this point, categorize these movements of a pick and roll, and now we've done many other things. Like, it could just basically narrate a game with the combined experience of knowledge of every single coach in the NBA. At the time, I said, that was almost 9 years ago, where like all the contenders were using it. Well, and shortly after, it was every team was using it. And then the other part was really important, where like taking good and bad shots or preventing good shots was like, it's entirely an entire game. It's almost the entire game. And it was just basically a qualitative endeavor for the history of the game. And now it became a quantitative one. And there's some stories that we had, like we got to know several players and coaches, and some players would even tell us that like the coaches became very, very quantitative, and they would yell at them. Before, they would yell at them and we're like, they'd say, you got to do this, otherwise it's really bad. And now they would yell at us like, you got to do this because we lose 0.3 points of efficiency if we do it this versus that. And like, it changed the language of how coaches yelled at players in practice, which is like fascinating to me. And so that was really, really special that you could just start seeing the impact. Like, I mean, I couldn't tell, like, there are even stories like we've definitely, I can't tell it, I probably still can't tell these stories. Like, we have definitely been responsible for a couple of championships. I mean, we have the stories, but we can't tell them, and they can't give us rings, otherwise it'd be too public. But I'll know in my heart that like that was like, there were a couple of things that were just sort of because of stuff that we did. But it is very, very gratifying. So we really started locking in on coaches and teams, and that was very, very gratifying. But I think we wanted to hit more and more people. We wanted to be able to get. Basically, we were really into data visualization, which we were here. We were like, it was part of it was very hard to communicate a lot of stuff, but we also wanted to get the stuff out into the fans. And we also believed that like broadcasters would eventually become more and more personalized. And so we were one of the first people to really push that idea forward. Where basically we're using all the available data and marrying with a fan broadcast. And that happened here in partnership with the Clippers and Steve Ballmer. He was really into it. And back in, I think, 16, 17, 18, we basically launched this thing called Clippers Court Vision, which was, I think, it basically launched what has, really continued to carry throughout the last 8-9 years. But it was sort of the first time where we said, like, we can take all this data and fundamentally change the way people view the game. And so here's a sort of a short bit of what we did there. So.
Foot Vision is an enhanced view, if you will, of the game of basketball. That'll over time be interactive, it'll be social, but we give you views that might be interesting to you by having AI software analyze the game and tell you what's the probability of each player making a shot real time throughout the game. What play did the team just run? We'll diagram it on the floor for you in real time. If you want to watch kind of the fun version, we'll show you fan reaction and defense, and we can overlay on top of the screen all of these enhancements that are being automatically figured out and generated by the computer. Now, you can only get this over the internet in the Fox Sports application.
We think everyone will watch sports this way. There will be a day when you look back and say, I can't imagine we all used to watch the same thing at the same time. That seems silly. And this is, I think, the start of that. For me, this is like exciting. It's like rolling off the first car or rolling off the first computer, where like it's going to get a lot better, but like the first one that ships, that comes off the factory line is super exciting, which is why today is very, very exciting for us.
Here comes Beverly. Luke, away, deep bingo.
What we're doing is we basically have cameras in every single end.
We had, at that point, we sort of cameras in every single NBA arena. And I think the key thing there was, I think for the first time, people had used tracking data and done like highlights and little things and stuff at halftime. This was the first time, I think, that we had basically taken every single frame, 25 frames a second of every single game, we're going to take all this data and we are going to augment reality with it. And whether it's sort of just knowing the players' names to taking those shot probabilities and putting them over every single second, or whether it was taking the pick and roll and drawing it on the floor or doing explosions or fires on three, we were saying like, we are going to basically show that if you unleash for every single frame all the data available, and again, make it for a coach, make it for, if you want to get the mind of the coach, the mind of the player, the mind of the fan, you can basically do this. And so that idea was, again, French launched here with the Clippers, and that idea has really, it hasn't gone as fast as I know, but it's clearly, it's all over the place now. You'll see it in alternate broadcasts, alternate visuals, and you can especially start to see it ramp up more recently as sort of big tech has come into sport, and streaming is taking a larger role in sort of, because streaming really unlocks the ability to have multiple experiences, right? When you have a TV on cable, you basically only get one feed to your house. It's like the radio, whereas like basically digital allows you to have sort of variation and sort of modify what you're seeing. And that's sort of a really important part of the future in almost every aspect. I think a lot of what technology is doing is sort of like allowing everyone to have their own personalized interactive experience with something, whether it's a map, whether it's music, and you see that with pretty much everything in your life, whether it's food, whatever it happens. It's like the idea that you make one product and you crank it off a factory floor and you send it to everybody is like, that is not how the mode of operation is in almost any industry today. And then sort of it started to kept spreading. I think CBS was the first one. There was a thing called Romo Vision that Tony Romo used, and we made that. So that ended up being an Emmy.
Go ahead and play this. He's going to come from your right. Ben pump fakes, gives himself time and throws a strike.
So Tony Romo, the NFL, and he basically used that on his broadcasts, and that was sort of like a couple of years ago. We won, like it was crazy because we were this people working with the Clippers saying like, this is the way it's going to be, and then a bunch of years later, like we ended up with our first Emmy, and then again last year we won another one because I don't know if you've seen Amazon got football, and they basically have this alternate viewing experience called Prime Vision, where basically you can just watch the game, but looks like Madden. It's got route trees, it's got players, it's got all this stuff, and basically Second Spectrum. That's what we make that. It goes on the air, but we basically make Prime Vision. And actually that student Sheldon, who was a student here, and one of the people who got I think he's the only one who didn't drop out of school. He was a chemical engineer and he was almost graduated. So he's the only one who didn't drop out of here. Give him a hard time for that. So if you haven't seen Prime Vision, this is sort of what it looks like, but it's there for every NFL game on Amazon. And so this is what Prime Vision looks like. So we can draw route trees, we can draw out the player names, we can put stats over their heads, speeds, quarterback, time in pocket. We can highlight defenders, probabilities of making field goals. So it's just a lot more like a video game. It looks a lot more like Madden. There should be sound.
Inside the 40, Jabril Peppers.
Vision machine learning shows you the threats that the quarterback might be feeling, the threats of a blitz and where that pressure may be. This time, the AI is correct in diagnosing where the pressure.
17. Deflected. Unfortunately, and they keep rolling for 7. That's in. Fires off. Smith. Fires over the middle. Great grab by Metcalf.
So that's that. In fact, so we won back-to-back Emmys, and that first person, I don't know if you noticed in the first video that I showed you about Second Spectrum, his name was Steve Bornstein. He was the CEO of ESPN for a very, very long time, and then he was the CEO of the NFL Network and ABC Sports for a long time. He basically started the two biggest sort of, I call it, sports broadcast entities, and at one point when we won like an Emmy or 2 Emmys, he was like tell me when you have 60 or whatever. I can't give these away. I can't remember if it was 60. It was probably bigger than 60, but it was still like, I think it was not that we wanted. I think it was the idea that like when we first started out, everything we were saying about machines are going to understand sports and coaches will trust them and people will watch broadcasts that are completely rendered by machines. And so when you go from being like, just being the crazy one in the room to later, basically you can't run an NBA team without it, and Emmys, which are pretty like traditional awards, start like you start getting these things for augmented broadcast, and you can sort of feel that like you have made some waves, and the world is going to be different going forward, because of what you have done, and that's a really good feeling. A couple of the other things we've done, we've just recently, Second Spectrum has announced that they're going to do the WNBA starting this upcoming season. That's super exciting. Instead from moving dots, we're going to 3D pose. Like basically now we're going to get like a much more data from every single player. That's something that we did many 5 years ago, but it's taken a while again for that to roll out in the industry. We did that, and so if you're interested in Caitlin Clark or is launching the NBA, we're going to probably have a lot of awesome data about her. And then we also didn't stay in the US. We moved over to England and we started working with the English Premier League, and we've been there for a very long time doing lots of cool stuff over there, both on the working with teams, working with the league, with all kinds of stuff there, working with broadcasters, and even that sort of started to take off. So here's some stuff that we're doing in the world of soccer.
We've created something called hype mode for never seen before animated live effects.
Straight away as far as Jorginho, and then Mason Mount. Good shot, good goal. Breaks for Milner, picks out Keita, chance to shoot, hits the bar.
They do things, it's how they gain success.
Lovely serve by Salah, inviting ball here for Sadio Mane, brilliant goal.
And here's a little bit more of the stuff in the world of soccer. Let's go to here. So there's a lot of soccer out there in the world. There's a really truly a global sport, and there's a lot of stuff going on there. And I could probably spend hours just talking about what's going on in the world of soccer. I still call it soccer because I think America beat England in the last World Cup 0-0 fair and square. So I think we get to name it now until the next time they can actually beat us. And so I think a lot of the journey, I think you'll probably see, like a lot of stuff I showed you was sort of lots of different projects, both stuff at ISI and products and customers. But I think that the key thing that I think is really the true thing which underlies everything is people. I think like I hear about the people who brought me here, who helped us get to the next stage, helped us get started. The students, the large group. I mean, we had hundreds and hundreds of students when we had one of the, I think we had probably the largest research group because we worked with everybody. We worked with lots of undergrads, lots of master students. I think we generally had I think the highest count of volume of students. We worked with lots of them. We loved it. Brought many of them with us. And even at Second Spectrum, what you didn't see was really, it was a journey about a journey of a lot of people. And so I think that gets lost. Like with all of this, whether you're here or whether you're there, it's really always about the people. And so this is sort of a quick, just to make sure I let you know that it's really about the people. Where am I looking for there? Further down. Give me 1 second. I thought it was here. Oh, here, right. Here we go.
Rajiv, great talk. I have a question. Is Lakers using second spectrum software or not?
Well, I can't specifically say whether the Lakers are using second spectrum software or not, but I can tell you all 30 teams are using them.
But they need the help if you're following the playoffs. So I think the coach can certainly do with some help.
Yeah, I mean, every team has it. I think what's really interesting is that early on, we had this conversation with, I probably shouldn't. So there was a very good team, very good team. And we were with their coaching staff, who was an elite coaching staff. And like everybody on the staff was previously or would go on to be a head coach. And we sort of made our presentation of our software, and then we went around the room and everybody said how awesome it was. And then there was this one guy who basically said, you know what this reminds me of? And we're trying to sell him the software, and it's like the Industrial Revolution. I'm like, oh, this can't be good. This is not a good sales meeting if he's bringing up the Industrial Revolution. He was talking about how cars came and put horses in buggies, or like manufacturing came and put like handmade cars out of business, and the other coaches were arguing like, but that was better because we made better and more cars and more people had cars. And I'm like, this is not going well at all. We're not gonna get the sale. Because I think he came after me afterwards like, I love what you're doing, but like I'm really worried that you'll put us all out of business. And I'm like, I promise you that is not going to happen. And this is the interesting. What happened is that when we first started, only a handful of teams had a handful of people, and now every single team has like a massive like every team has more than the maximum team had when we started, and they do all kinds of different things. And we used the idea that it was really kind of like an Iron Man suit, where like it really depends on who wears the suit. It's not it's not gonna win or lose games here, but it's like how you manage it. And what's fascinating is every single coaching staff uses it very, very differently because they have different players, different mindsets, different intents, but they all use the software to help optimize whatever they're trying to do with their team. So it's really quite interesting how everyone uses it in very, very unique ways. And you can see that move as they change staffs across the league, and people take it with them and bring it with them and do different things with them. And it's really fascinating. I think people truly underestimate the degree of, I think there's a lot said about being the NBA being, there was a lot of that stuff by the NBA being sort of like not as friendly for tech, and maybe even people like would talk about the Lakers. But I think what I will tell you is like the public has no clue of like the real distribution of how open they are, how much they're doing, which teams are doing more, which teams are less, because it's like, oh, there's a whole world where like, oh, you don't know, these people are really, I mean, when you're in a world where you have to win, like if you do something that brings value, like grudgingly or not, people will use it. Yeah.
But aren't teams worried that their competitors, that or you're talking to their competitors and you know what they're doing?
That's a good question. I think that was one of the first things that we had to get over, because like for us, like we crossed the bridge of trust where we basically tell us the deepest, darkest secrets of what you want to know, and we will make it appear for you. And the obvious thing is like, you're going to tell everybody else. And we really had to cross that bridge of gaining the trust of basically every single team, and that was quite an endeavor. And that was probably one of the hardest things to do, is like to get that bridge of trust. But it's one of those things, like if you keep doing the right things over and over again and keep delivering over and over again and build a reputation of trust, like you can get to that place where people are like, after a few years, people would bring their entire staff. So we had our office in Little Tokyo there, and they would hang out with us for 3-4 hours and just tell us everything. And because they knew like we didn't tell them anything about anybody else, so they just sort of knew that they could trust us, and we didn't. I mean, we actually kept I'm very proud of actually one of the reputation that we have within the league circles, where people know that like they can tell us anything, and it's quite locked. And I mean, we often know a bunch of stuff before many people do it. It's like you will never hear anything leak out of us, and we've been doing this for over a decade. And so it's just one of those things that you have to just build a reputation and take it as a sacred thing and value it very, very highly. Yeah.
I have a question online, and then we'll take one in the room and another one online. So from Jonathan Habib, we have, given last night's excitement, I'm wondering if the software can be or is used to analyze college games for making draft decisions.
Last night's excitement, it's exciting every night. So I think the data like this has been used to affect draft choices, but it's not as wide because college is in a very dynamic environment, and basically the source data is not uniform across all college games. So it's hard to sort of get sort of a normalized baseline of what to believe. And there's college has a lot of variance. So I think we will get there where college has the same, technology and data as the NBA, but it's not quite, the NBA is not because every game, every team is tracked and every team has access to the raw core data. That is, and in college is sort of hit or miss. We've definitely worked with colleges. We've worked with colleges for a long time. And we have there are partners there that work with the data. Yeah, it's not quite as widespread, which makes it not as useful. Correct.
So it seems like it's analogous to Moneyball, right? Which had a huge impact in terms of baseball selecting and hiring stuff. So it seems like down the road, it could have a similar kind of impact.
Well, the only difference is it's not down the road. I mean, it's not. I remember in our first year, we were still building the software, and it was in a very, very nascent stage. Like an NBA owner called me and told me, it's hey, we just made a trade based on some data that we found on your thing. And I was like, oh God, please, I hope the thing that he said would be good about this player ended up being good. And I'm like, I was actually religiously watching that during the end of the season because he had a particular, we had able to identify a particular skill that this player had. And then I was just please have that skill for the rest of the season so I don't feel terrible. But very early on, they started making player decisions.
It's just not college level,
but in the NBA, yeah. And so, whether it's how to put together data, who to take. So yeah, very early on, they started basically making Moneyball decisions right off this data. Yeah.
We have a question online from Ajay. He's unmuted now.
Hi, Rajiv. Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. So going from a sport like basketball, which is very event driven, to football, and I'm still calling it football, even though USA beat England. In football, you don't have a lot of it's harder to quantify events. What are the challenges that you have come across in a sport like football?
So it turns out there actually are a lot of events in soccer. It's just that before, so interesting. I think soccer is the place where data makes the biggest difference, and it's because soccer is a very unique sport. So if you talk about the classical box score events, baseball had a lot, basketball had a lot, football had some, and you could actually do some work. You can obviously 10 or 100x that with data. But soccer, if you were just looking at goals and shots on goals, you missed the entire game. I didn't quite really realize. I started watching a lot more soccer when we won the Premier League, and it's all the whole game is a spatial travel game. It's all the diagrams and the formations and the dynamic movement of the dots is the game. The goals, maybe there's a handful of goals every game, and they're clearly important. But if you're both watching a soccer game or a coach or a player, there's way more that's going on. I mean, that's why people now I get why people think a 0-0 tie is an exciting game, because there was a lot of stuff that happened there that didn't make itself on the way to the scoreboard, but there was a lot of stuff going on. And the way you would talk about, people would talk about, a fan would talk about, a coach would talk about, existed. There just wasn't a data source that could actually reliably generate those words and concepts in a way, because sometimes you actually need to have a reliable source of data, because sports is really all talking about data. If you didn't have the word pass, catch, yards, now people talk about shot quality only because we invented shot quality as a number. But once you start having the words categorized and being displayed in part of your ecosystem, you actually talk about it. Now, we haven't gotten those words out into the public as much, but in the teams, inside the soccer teams do a lot of work, basically both understanding spatial characteristics and there are a lot of words that have transition, phase, build up, this formation, and so if you watch a soccer game under sort of our filter, which I guess I can't show you around because it's not public, there's quite a bit that goes on there. And I feel like data has more upside between what you see right now and what it could be than any other sport, because for most people it seems extremely sparse. So it's very exciting what will happen in the world of soccer because of this data.
Thank you.
So it feels like this is a bait and switch because I saw no staring into the abyss and no eating glass in your talk. And it was all beautiful scenes of how great your stuff is, but
Eat some
what was
glass.
along the way.
Oh, so I think the reason I did that was actually intentional, because if you had seen everything I had shown you without that first, it would seem like it was nothing but like awesomeness every day. And it was, but the awesomeness was not like it's funny because like all these videos, I'm only using like publicly available videos, come out every time there's a spike of moment of glory. Like we in the NBA, there's a TED talk, we launch Court Vision, we win the Premier League, but those are like maybe a couple times a year, something like that. And every day in between is just like, again, staring into the abyss and eating glass. And I would say like, so I will also separate this. The staring into the abyss and eating glass is much more true for the CEO than it is for everyone else in the journey. So that I think that's a key part, is like, if you're the CEO, that is much more true for the CEO than everyone in a startup. So that I think that is a key point to separate. But I think for everybody else, it's like, it is part of the excitement is the ride, that it's quite tenuous. It's filled with danger. I mean, I had to stand up and tell people many, many times, it's like, something bad happened. We got 2 weeks of money left. We got 6 months of money left. We got 3 months of money left. I don't know what's going to happen. And you've got the kind of people who are like, they hear that and they're like, okay, I'll get back to work, and it's like, and it's hard, and we had to get through a pandemic and all. I mean, like, there were all kinds of things that you just have to, like, customers come and go on precarious and capricious reasons. I mean, that's capricious because they always have the reasons. You have to respect that, but like they can be like high variance. So there's two sides of the coin. There's definitely parts of it that are like, almost everything that has quite a bit of glory comes with quite a bit of price. I always look at it like, I mean, I have 3 small children now, and like that's one of those sort of like my children are the best things that have happened to me, and probably also the cause more pain than anything that I've ever had in my life. So they have these properties where like this awesome thing has this quite a price. I mean, in terms of, I'm glad to pay it, because it's like I love the thing, and the startup in a way is that it's like a little baby that like it has quite a price, but it's glorious. And so I think it's important to see both sides of the coin, because I wouldn't just say like it's not for everyone. I think Elon's good at putting it. He went in front of a bunch of people and said, what inspiring words do you give to somebody who wants to do a startup? And his answer was like, if you need inspiration, like you shouldn't do it. I mean, I think it's one of those things that you have to be compelled to do. And I think he said that too. It's like, I think, yeah. And I think when we started, like, we were compelled. We're like, oh, this is cool. We should go give it a try. Now, it was important that we didn't know how hard it would be, because we might not have, but after the fact, it was like, I will say after the fact, and even if we had like ended up as well as it did very early on, within a few years, when we had like teams using it and it had made a dent, like I was already happy that like, oh, we made a dent in a way that I don't think I could have made a dent anywhere else, and it felt quite rewarding to do that. But yeah, I think it's important, like, that there's always, and this is another thing you learn when you do a startup, there's no something that's all good and all bad. Everything is a trade-off. Every choice is a trade-off. Everything is a trade-off. And then you just have to understand, like, where do you want to live on, hopefully, the Pareto frontier of choices. So it is a bit about, I wouldn't call it a bait and switch. I would say, like, no, I would just say that there are other dimensions. And it's not definitely not for everyone, but I do think it is undervalued in terms of like the positivity it can give both for yourself and the world. Yes.
So I love the Romo vision. I'm a big football fan.
Oh, yeah.
And I wish you could give it to Lincoln Riley and get us back to prominence. But at the same time, I have to say, sometimes it's too much data, right? You take the fun out of it because there's so much data. And I'm a data person. Do you find that people get tired of constant, all of that data coming at them? Because I also feel like you lose like the excitement of just the humanness of the game. Somebody making a great shot, somebody throwing an interception. And do you find that it takes some of the fun out of it?
No, so I'll tell you, and here's my answer. So I think that is a sort of a scarcity view of watching sports, in the sense, like, in the past, when you could have had only one broadcast, everyone has to fight over what that broadcast needs to look like. But in a digital world, I love data, and I would want, you can't put enough stuff on the screen for me, but if you don't like it, you don't have to watch it. That's a beautiful, like if you go to Netflix, nobody cares about the shows they don't love because you don't watch them. You only care about the shows you do love. And so, for example, like, I mean, I remember when we launched Prime Vision, like I was sitting with my dad and I was like, I want to show him. It's like, look, but you know, the first Thursday night game we were doing, I turned it on, I showed it to him. And like, I was talking about all the route trees and the names, you can do all this. And he like beautifully, like, I was like, oh, that's very, very cool. Like, oh, and he talked about the tech. And like, after about like 15, 20 minutes, he's like, can we go back to the other one? I'm like, yeah. But I mean, that's beautiful. Like, my dad can, my dad's been watching sports for a very, very long time. He can watch the way he wants. I can watch the way I want. And even differently, it's not even, like, I might watch it differently if I'm by myself, if I'm with my kids, if I'm with my dad. Like, I might want something different if I know the players of the teams, if I don't know the players of the team. And so that's the whole idea. It's not that you should watch it with or without data. It's why shouldn't you get to choose how you watch it? Why shouldn't you have the option of changing it based on your mood, your knowledge, how you feel at the time? I think that's the thesis. It's not that you should watch it with data, that you should get to have an option. So for me, for example, I knew basketball, but like when I watch soccer, one of the biggest things in soccer is like even the broadcasters didn't know all the names of the players. If you watch a soccer broadcast in the UK, they're normally just saying the player of the name with the ball so that the fans can know who has the ball. And sometimes they were like, I remember like it's a number 8 from Luton Town, and they wouldn't even say his name because like they couldn't remember who it was. And so just like that's a huge deal in soccer because of the way it's shot. The problem is either like the whole field matters because it's a game of sort of a spatio-temporal game theory, but also like the players matter and like the way they shoot it, like you can't see the field or you can't see the player, and you're always losing something the way they broadcast. And so here we were able to put player names on their heads and have a little mini map like in, I guess we used to call FIFA, where you could see the field. So it's like a way where you could get everything. You'd watch the mini close up. You could know who the players are. You could sort of watch the game. And I feel like that's just a guaranteed win in the way of like, it's a no brainer win in how soccer is broadcast. And that's it's going to take a while to spread out, but I think like that's going to become a default broadcast. But the bigger thing is personalization.
Sorry, one last question, and I'll ask it in context of the sports I care about. So what are your thoughts of applicability of this to Formula One?
So F1 actually has a lot of data, and they're one of they get quite a bit of, we were never involved in F1, but F1 is they were one of the first sports to really get into data. They have a lot of stuff tracked on the cars, and they integrated a lot with their broadcast. So I think F1 is actually quite deep in data and integrating data with broadcast.
Yeah, so my experience is since last year, AWS is the partner, and I do see similar metrics coming up in the broadcast about like tracking of the cars, everything.
And I think as tech companies get more and more into sports, they're much more, both the fact that it's digital streaming where you can have multiple options and the fact that they're just much more, we partnered with we work with AWS sponsored Clippers Court Vision. We worked with Amazon Prime on their Prime Vision broadcast. I think they even sponsored Romo Vision, so I might have that wrong. So
do you view AWS as a threat to your business or still as a partner?
I mean, no, I think that they're, I don't know if you know this, but Amazon's quite a large company, and the minimum threshold to move a business line there is quite high. I think I'm actually quite glad because I think with people like Amazon, Google, Apple coming into sports, it's actually going to make a lot of this stuff accelerate a lot faster. It's good. I was hoping they would come in even sooner. Yep.
We have a question from Marcelia and then a comment from online.
Okay.
Hi, Arcelia, Viterbi Startup Garage. And on behalf of the early stage teams that always have questions from successful ventures, when you finally found your product market fit, like what was your go-to-market strategy? I mean, you can't just like burst into the Clippers office. Like, how did that work for you? And once you started getting momentum, like, can you like talk a little bit about your fundraising journey because of that? Was there like a tipping point? I know it's really, I don't want to take you back to the worst.
No. It was like, the answer, the go-to-market strategy, I think is just like hustle, like straight hustle. Like, I mean, like for NBA, like there was Las Vegas, Las Vegas has a summer league. And there was a time where like we need to get, and that's where everybody in the NBA was. And there's like 2 gyms where they have all these summer league games. like what happened was all those students, we got an embassy suites, like suite room, and like there was 5 the early employees, like our co-founder and before we're sitting in a conference room coding away on an app that was on this machine that we call the Beast. And then like we took this beast of a machine and Yuhan and I would run around Vegas trying to look for general managers that we were like, I think that looks like Daryl Morey. And we just like ran after people trying to get him to sit and give us a demo. I mean, even when like with the Clippers and I just literally cold emailed the Clippers and so the Clippers ended up being one of our clients, and they wanted to get Steve Ballmer an account to our software, and I was like, I'm gonna go straight cold email him and probably won't answer, and but I'm gonna take a shot. And like super nice. It was like I just kind of invited him into our little Tokyo office. Like, do you want a demo? I mean, I'm glad to teach you the demo. Like, here's your account. And he didn't answer. And so I thought, I took a shot. But like a few weeks later, he's like, sounds cool. What do you want me over? And he came over. And so, I mean, you take a lot. I'm not saying that it always works like that. Like we took lots of shots that went nowhere. But I was like, you just like, I don't know. I think for me, like go to market strategy. I mean, sure, it gets more advanced as you get larger things, but like early on, it's just like you gotta hustle, man. You gotta like do what it takes. And yeah, in terms of fundraising, it's like, oh my god, like I did a lot of fundraising, and it's like we had a seed, then we almost died, and somebody saved us, and we almost died, and somebody saved us, and then we had a really awesome round, and then we almost died, and somebody saved us, and then we had the pandemic almost, it killed us, and then we almost got acquired, and then the pandemic killed that, and then we were back to being dead, but then we had some awesome fundraising, and we were great again, and then we got acquired and closed the second time. And man, I spent like most of my life doing that, and you just have to have a stomach for it, because it's like you definitely have to iterate, because like when you get rejected, there's a reason for it. It's not like you say like they just don't like me. You've got to keep working and iterating on the hypothesis that you're putting out into the world. But man, that is also like just straight hustle, stamina. I mean, it was rough. I mean, we faced death a lot, but
Did you have a kill criteria?
What do you mean?
For yourself? At what point did you have a threshold where you're like, okay, I'm out of this? Like it's
no, I think
not
in fact, I would say the biggest thing that I brought to the table was like, you can't kill me. Like I can't. I'm like, there's nothing. Like there's many times where everybody's like, we should just quit. And I'm like, no way. You will have to stamp me into the ground and like stakes through my heart before I will quit. Like I just can't. Like that was the one thing, because I have plenty of game tape to know that I have taken a lot of stuff and just kept ticking. And that was probably the biggest thing, is like we just would not. I was not gonna like. It was not gonna stop. We would have to be like burnt at the stake for us to be gone.
I have a follow-up question, and this is more on a personal note, just because I really love what you guys are doing and thinking about Second Spectrum and the future and what you guys offer. I'm assuming that you're aggregating like almost like player profiles, right? You have all of this analytical data on very specific players. Like, do you see that influencing like the gaming market or even fantasy leagues where people can kind of put together?
Yeah, so my bias, I just left actually a few months ago, but a couple of years ago, we were acquired by a company called Genius Sports, and they're one of the bigger companies who basically, they're cross sports. They do tech, they do media, they do gaming. And so, I mean, to some degree, I can't speak to that, but I think like, and I'm sure there are things going on there that I'm not relevant, but clearly a lot of stuff there's a lot of people talk about a convergence going on in a lot of parts of sports. Like even like if you look at media and technology and coaching, we're all coming together, and then there's gaming and other parts of sports that are all coming together. And so, yeah, I guess like I mean, I think the trends are showing that it's happening, but like, I guess it's not my game anymore. So I'm sort of, I don't have to think about that. So I don't know, like a lot of things like, what are you able to predict? And so I guess I was mostly focused on working with the teams, working with the broadcasters, changing how people viewed and interact with the data. So that's just not an area that's not, but Second Spectrum now sits inside a company that's thinking a lot about that.
Okay, so we have an online thing.
Yes, we had, okay, Keith is going to unmute himself. Go ahead, Keith.
Hi, so this is Keith. I want to say that this is reminiscent of chess in my opinion. As someone who played a lot of chess, I think one of the big changes since maybe 2000 or 2010 was the greater use of chess engines, meaning that instead of these chess moves being brilliant, unknown or unknowable moves, suddenly it was very clear what was the best move and whether someone made a mistake or not in real time. So to me, it almost seems like this is what your method does, in the sense that you can know exactly what would be the best move or if players made mistakes or not. Is that true?
I think it's not quite as strict as chess, where like in chess, like you basically say like this computer that can basically beat any human. It's like a binary win-loss thing where right now, I don't think you can say like, okay, I'm going to replace the coach and the coaching staff and they will just know exactly what to do, or will tell you the wrong move that you made. Because a lot of it is sort of, there's a lot of still things that the human is a bridge between, because the actuators are these players who are these complex and interacting with these other entities, and there's a lot of complexity. So I think what we're doing is like basically informing the people who are making these calls to be much more smarter about the calls that they can make, because like they will make the smart moves if they were better informed, but in the past they weren't as well informed about the state or potential state of the game. And now with all that information, they themselves will adjust to make better moves. So it's not quite the same, because I think like there's still a lot of human control. It's almost like again, I would say it's almost it's really Iron Man suits. You're not, it's not chess has a much more thing where like one could argue like this move clearly has a higher expected value of winning versus this move if you simulate with the future. It's a much more dynamic game. So, but there are properties of that there where you just know more and you can be informed, and a machine can help you sort of iterate much faster on potential strategies, because like you might have a thought of what if I do X, right, in a game, and before you might have to like test it by just testing it out on games, but now that hypothesis that you might have as a coach you can apply it against the data and get a better sense of what the expected value of that particular strategy might be. So in that way you can iterate against data. So there is that property to chess, but it's not quite a zero-sum win-loss game. So I would say there's nuance to that. So stop it there.
That makes sense.
Thank you very much.